So I'm going to provide a couple of case studies that we've worked on over the last decade within Mapping for Change, just as a way to kind of set the context in terms of how citizen science projects can be developed and can be designed, and also the impact that they can have at various levels. So the first example I'm going to give you is actually, sorry, somebody's controlling the screen and not me. Let's go. The first example I'm going to give you is actually looking at air quality, and we've worked in a number of communities over the last 10 years in relation to collecting data, particularly looking at air quality. And one of the reasons, and I guess the benefits of using citizen science in this context, is current practices and ways in which air quality is monitored introduces certain limitations. So of course, all local authorities are legally required to monitor air quality, where you have large static, high-grade sensors which are deployed within a particular local authority area, which enables that kind of continuous monitoring. However, because of the cost of these large sensors, they are limited in terms of their distribution. So yes, it can give us, let's say, high quality data, but actually it's in specific locations. So as a result, we then have to look at kind of modeling air quality to infer what air quality levels are in, let's say, locations where we don't actually have sensors. And then the other extreme is obviously nowadays you've got a large number of low-grade sensors which are being developed and deployed, but there are issues in relation to the data quality and the data that those sensors give us. In particular, when we're looking at legislation and things like that, obviously they're not designed to be able to be utilized in that sense. There we go. So we had a project which was called Science in the City, which we were commissioned to do, to work on with the Corporation of London in central London. And there we worked with the residents within the Barbican community to undertake a year's air quality study. So in that particular community, it was very much what we would call, in terms of the engagement, a collaborative kind of community science program, in the sense that the community were very much involved in deciding what, where, when, and how. And in that particular project, we were looking at air quality, but we decided to focus on two areas. One was nitrogen dioxide, and the second was looking at particulates. So the community used diffusion tubes to monitor nitrogen dioxide, and an aerosol, a portable aerosol monitor to look at particulates. So they looked at areas that they were particularly concerned about or perceived hotspots within the City of London, but also looking at monitoring areas which at that time were perceived to be kind of lower levels of pollution. So we designed the survey and the, let's say, data collection protocol based on those two aspects. And what the community did was actually erect diffusion tubes in designated locations across the Barbican estate and road network around the area. And this was done over 12 months. So each month the diffusion tubes were deployed, erected, then collected, and then a next set put out. So what that enabled us to do is actually collect the kind of monthly averages over 12 months, and then be able to actually work out the annual mean in relation to nitrogen dioxide in that particular area. In addition, looking at the personal exposure, we used the aerosol monitor, and different individuals within the community actually took the aerosol monitor and used it in their daily commutes. So going backwards and forwards to the shops, going to work, so that would give us an indication in terms of their personal exposure when we're talking about particulates. Oops, sorry, I've skipped a slide. Let me go back one. So what we did is that information was mapped and collected on a community mapping platform, which we'll talk a little bit about later on in the presentation, so that each diffusion tube, the monthly data that was gathered, was placed on this map, and obviously each location was mapped for every month. So that gave us basically 713 measurements over the course of 12 months to understand what the nitrogen dioxide levels were in each of these locations. When we looked at the particulates and the exposure levels, what we did is we comprised individual kind of maps, static maps for people's exposure in relation to particulates, but then we also made a composite map. So this map, this image that you're seeing here, is actually the combination of all of the data that was collected during this particular period across the routes that each individual took. So it gave us kind of an idea of those kind of particulate levels across that time. So yes, that's what we did. And then people say, okay, so what? One, there was a whole new data set that the Corporation of London were able to actually have in relation to the citizen science programme, which actually was filling in gaps in relation to the information that obviously they collect on a regular basis. And on the back of that, and the discussions and the meetings that kind of came out from the results of this, the residents came up with a wish list, and that was looking at, okay, we want to enforce traffic restrictions in certain locations. We also want to kind of look at the control measures with regards to emissions from construction sites within the City of London. And we also want to look at being able to introduce green infrastructure as a way to kind of mitigate and reduce certain exposure levels, which was really great. And I mean, from the City of London's perspective, is they were really encouraged because one, it was generating an increased awareness and understanding of the air quality, but it also gave the citizens an insight into what the local authority were doing in relation to looking at air quality. And on the back of this, there was a feasibility study that was undertaken to look at the options to reduce vehicles emitting high levels of pollution. And this went on to piloting an ultra low emission street and also a potential zero emission zone as part of the city's draft transport strategy. So it wasn't just about engaging the citizens, and it wasn't just about collecting data. It was then how we use this data to actually inform policies and also looking at getting acceptance from the residents and the local community in relation to some of those measures that were being introduced. So the one thing I just want to kind of emphasize here in terms of this particular approach and this particular program is the scalability and replicability. This is something that can be done anywhere and in any communities. And this is just an example here because we've done exactly the same project with schools in Barcelona, in where they monitored actually 800 locations. And we've also deployed exactly the same approach and method in Uganda, in the capital city, Kampala. So again, these are approaches and ways in which you can engage communities anywhere. And just as an example, again, in terms of scalability and replicability, in the case of Barcelona, you can see they use the same community mapping platform and system to map the data, the nitrogen dioxide data that they collected there. You can see it's all in Catalan, so we won't actually be able to read half of it, but that platform is actually multi